Hey, Michelle, what are we doing today?
Hey, Maddie. So the Princeton Review does this annual survey. It's called the College Hopes and Worries Survey. So we're going to take today to kind of dive into the 2025 survey results and talk about what over 9,000 high school seniors and their parents from all across the country are thinking about.
No shortage of hopes and or worries in college admissions. Let's talk about what they mean.
I thought would be a good time to kind of talk about it because we're kind of in that lull. We're like in the March to April where their parents and students are just like waiting. They're waiting for decisions. So I thought it'd be kind of interesting just to like look at some of these findings for the survey that just came out. So this survey has been going on for like 22 years. And this year, there are about 9,300 college applicants plus their parents that responded to the survey. So, the first one that we're going to talk about is dream colleges. And the question that was asked was, what dream college do you wish you or your child could attend if acceptance and cost weren't issues? So, this was like a fill in the blank answer. So, there were several hundred different colleges that were named, like community colleges, private universities, flagship state schools. But the top 10 for students are MIT, Harvard College, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, NYU, Michigan, Penn, and UCLA. And then for parents, the top one was Princeton, followed by MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Michigan, Columbia, Duke, NYU, and then UT Austin. So my first question to you, Maddie, is when you see like the student responses versus parent responses, like does anything stand out to you?
No. On my own consultation form, I have listed what's your number one top school. And I should probably change it to like, are there some schools you want to go to? But what it says to me, why I have it is often by what a student puts there, I have a better idea of the range, like what their mindset is for where they'll be applying. Where if a student puts MIT or Harvard or yeah, I'm like, okay, so that means the student actually wants to apply to pretty much all the top schools, and then probably the tier below that. If they put like NYU or yeah, I guess NYU is a good one. Or what else is on here? If they put Michigan, like those are the ones that actually stand out to me, are the ones that are not like Harvard, Stanford, Yale. It's like, okay, they was like, well, there's often a story behind that. Like they live that
Mhm.
state, they really want to go there, or that yeah, they don't have the same. They don't have the same dreams of like a lot of my students. I call it the cornucopia. Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Princeton, etc. So I guess what jumps out to me here are the ones that yes, and basically NYU, Michigan, UCLA, Texas, because those are different. Whereas like MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, like yeah, literally, it's MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. Yeah, we have a name for that. It's called HIPSM.
Yeah.
Like yeah, I guess it could be like it's so sad. The students just like I don't know. It's not me. Like that some of this will tape back to the prestige episode we did last
Mhm.
time, where my idea of yeah, we get to dream schools in general, but looking at this list, yeah, the parents is Princeton, MIT, State. That's also HIPSM, just in a different order.
Right, right.
So like, not a ton jumps out. It's what I would have expected. I guess Texas is a little bit. So I'm surprised NYU makes both lists. But yeah, it's pretty much what you'd think, right?
Do you think that because like MIT is at the top of the students and Princeton at the top of parents, is that like does that show, especially coming from talking about computer science, does this show kind of a change in what students are looking for? Like are they leaning more towards like STEM techie type of schools rather than like a traditional Ivy? Whereas parents, it's kind of a generational thing where they're kind of still stuck on an Ivy.
I'm surprised. Well, Princeton is 4. I guess probably if you want to talk about just HIPSM in general, I would say your average student who comes to me, I would say Harvard, MIT, and Stanford tend to be pretty closely tied, and Yale, like Yale's probably Princeton. Like in my somewhat limited experience, Princeton being first in the parent situation and fourth in students, I guess makes more sense. Is I have maybe it's just small sample size, but I have not had as many students interested in Princeton as their top school for whatever reason. Like that's
Hmm.
probably the one note. I guess it's like top 10 dream schools, and I guess the concept is kind of silly to me because I don't know nor care like what my students' dream schools are. I want to talk about like dream schools. Wait, dream
That's
schools
actually a
more like
question I was going to ask you. Like, what do you think of this concept of dream school?
what's a word that rhymes with dream? That dream schools. I don't subscribe to the dream school philosophy too much. Both more so in practice, like I have students apply to like 25 schools, which we're also going to get to in this.
Mhm.
And part of that is that I like to demystify the college admissions process. And part of that is there is no school that is perfect for any student. There is no school that they are destined to go to, nor will they'll be perfectly happy at. And I truly believe that. Like these schools are all there's good schools on this list. They're all, they're all pretty solid. But in actual like the actual process of applying is what I ask is do you have I don't have dream schools, like do you have an early school?
Okay.
I'm more practical about it. Do you have an early decision school or a restricted early action school? And if the student says Stanford, I'll be like, "Are you sure you want to? Is it like how much? Because if we apply to say Brown or Cornell or what have you, we will get an early decision boost in our percentages of going up of you actually getting in." And they're like, "Nah, I want to go to Stanford." I go, "Okay, cool. We'll apply to Stanford then." So students actually have dream schools. I doubt at any point in the process I internalize what that really means. Like I know logistically like what school we're going to be applying to early because that's now the work we have to be doing and like that's not what I'm thinking of. And more often than not, I will say that the vast majority of the time, the early school is their dream school. I mean, I maybe talk students into changing their dream a little bit if
Yeah.
it's a little more practical, but yeah, like I do not bully students away from applying early to where they really want to go. I think that's unfair. If I don't think they have any chance, I might tell them that. And I've definitely applied to like your Stanfords and Harvards early, knowing like this kid's not going to get in. But also, more often than not, that student kind of knows that too. It's because they don't have an early school they care about that much, and we apply to Stanford because they'd like to go to Stanford. It's okay to have a dream school, I suppose, but just in practice, I it's not like pretty much do everything in my power to limit. Like the idea of it is kind of silly to me. Like these schools are all very good.
Yeah, so, like, if they came to you in a consultation and they were, like, the parent and the student is going on about, like, this dream school, do you kind of try to, like, pivot and redefine that for them?
Well, part of what I say in my consultation is that I am not the Stanford guy or the Yale guy or the Harvard guy. That guy or lady might exist, and they probably worked there in 1997, so they know everything about the process, as we all know, because they worked there for 2 years in the late 90s. My goal is the end of this process, students are as happy as they possibly could be with both the selection of schools they're going to and where they actually choose to attend. That they are pleased and get the results they are looking for overall in the college admissions process. And I have found that that is more flexible than my dream school is Harvard. I did or did not get into Harvard. It's not that simple. And just I've found that rather like Yale's the one that pops up. Let's talk about Yale, where I have had multiple students. Their dream school was
Mhm.
Yale, and they always have the little bulldog, and they watch just like Rory Gilmore. It's the same story. Like, I
Right.
know how they got here, and it's also because I believe Yale is the approachable, impossible dream hipsum school where it's like, I mean, of course I can't get into Harvard or Stanford, but like I get it. Like
Maybe,
I
yeah.
this, this happened enough times. I've kind of figured out how Yale becomes one dream school. Then we apply early, and on multiple occasions, that student has gotten into Yale, and it's tears of
Hmm.
joy. Like we did it, like mission accomplished, everybody. Oh my god. Well, then there's restricted early action. We can still apply. It's like, well, why don't we take a crack at Harvard or Stanford or et cetera? It's like, well, okay, and that's the same student getting to Yale is on call with me on January 3rd, finishing their Harvard application because like
Oh my gosh.
you can take the dog out of the fight, but you can't take the fight out of the dog, I guess. And I'm not, and I allow it. It's like, and that yeah, it's like I don't care. It's like, yeah, of course I want to get into Harvard too. I go to my website. Like that's how I see dream schools. It's like, great, we got into Yale, but like we can apply to Harvard. Let's see what happens. You're a pretty strong applicant. Then they get into Harvard, and then suddenly their big dream school. Even when it's Yale, it's not. It's a little bit different now. It's like, oh shit, I got into Harvard. Like I think every student's actual dream school is probably Harvard, Stanford, or MIT. Is my real opinion
Mm. Mhm.
because truly dream school. It should be a list of three schools, and I do believe that there's Harvard, Stanford, MIT. Like those are the three schools in America that are the actual three real top of the college admissions ladder, and everything else kind of flows from there. I never really fell into the idea of like, this is just a jumbo version of like, what's the perfect fit for you, sweetie? Which I use that term all the time. It's
Yeah.
like same reason I don't believe that there's some liberal arts college in Montana that's gonna like make all your dreams come true. I
Right.
don't like that's not my specialty, but even if I was that kind of consultant, I wouldn't believe that. So maybe that's why I instead try to get kids in the most elite school in the country that I think are probably the most excellent schools, just as my general thing. But even within that, never am I talking about it's like Brown, like we got to get into Brown. It's like I don't care. Like we're applying to 25 schools for a reason. Like we're gonna let them figure it out. And then, if anything, this all comes into play, I guess, now in a couple weeks from now when students know where they are and aren't into. Like that's when I start talking a lot more about like, well, what would it actually mean to go to Stanford versus NYU versus all those different schools.
Right.
It is irrelevant in the college admissions process how much you actually wish to attend the school you're applying. And that is that may sound like either mean and or obvious, but that is a core aspect of how I actually apply with students and how I think about this process. I think there's a lot of students, if only because in the actual application work, just really wanting to go there, that doesn't really translate very well, and if it and honestly, if it does, like, I think it can backfire. We come off as kinda thirsty or
Mm,
desperate.
mhm.
Like, my students I've never used the term "dream school" in an
Yeah.
application with a student, and you've seen neither have you with the "why school"
No.
stuff. Instead, it's this school has all these opportunities I'm really excited about, and that's often genuine because they are excellent schools. But, yeah, like, I guess just, like, top 10 dream schools in all bold, it just doesn't connect with how I actually see this process. Like, these are, like, I guarantee you I've had multiple students that have applied to every single school on both of these lists, you know, probably
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, I bet I go in my files. I've had at least probably a half dozen students that have applied to MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, New York, NYU, Michigan, Penn, UCLA, totally. Probably more like a dozen or 2 dozen, you know, it's like
Mhm.
those, yeah.
So, like, Penn makes the students list, but not the parents list. Does that surprise you, or are there any schools that did not make the list that surprise you?
Well, when you say dream school, I like it makes sense to me that Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Yale, and Stanford are the top 5 for both. Probably the most interesting is then you get Michigan is 6th, Columbia, yeah, like, the list makes enough like, it's just the US News World Report rankings, except Michigan found its way in here, UCLA, and I'd probably Texas making it on the parents list is interesting. Um, this is also why I consider UCLA, Berkeley, and Michigan the only 3 prestigious state schools in America. I can't help but notice that the University of Virginia not on either of these
Hmm.
lists. Isn't that
Good
weird?
point.
Yeah, it's I bet the top my guess is you said it's been going on for many years. If you go back, it's gonna be these top 5 schools are going to be the top 5 over and over and over and over again, and there'll be a plenty of churn, which I would suspect is more noise than anything because I don't know how this poll was done. Was it basically they only get to pick one school, or is there any sort of it's like, what is your dream school,
They
right?
got to fill in the blank.
Right. So I bet a large percentage of students put one of the 5 schools and parents put one of the 5 HIPSM schools. And yeah, because I have on my contact form, like, what is your number one top school? And
Mhm.
I go back and do my own research. I would guess, yeah, well over, yeah, 70-80% of it is a HIPSM school. So often MIT, Harvard, or Stanford. Probably the most interesting thing is whenever anyone puts MIT, they just put it. But then when they put Stanford, they usually explain why. And if they put Harvard, they admit they're embarrassed to have said so. Like, that's something I've noticed about the number one top school choice. Yeah, my guess is that I wish there was almost like the percentage of students who do that. But I think there's going to be a lot of noise in the second half of these because such a high percentage of students put that, and like that's okay. Like, and that maybe that's why students come to me with like what their dream school is. It's pretty easy for me to convince them that their dream school is actually Cornell or Penn or what have you. But that's yeah, I think it makes enough sense.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit like 2024 versus 2025 and some of the differences. So,
Mhm.
kind of the notable difference was like UT Austin last year appeared on the students list, but this year it doesn't. But one thing I thought was interesting was Brown was on the list for both last year, and then it's not there at all this year. And then like Cornell made an appearance last year, but not this year. So, do these changes like indicate anything to you? Like
Just that
why?
there's always gonna be turnover in the applications. Probably something I find interesting is Columbia. Columbia made it back on the list these years,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Columbia was on the students list last year, but not this year. And then
yeah, Columbia in the news the last year and a half, and I think that kings stay kings, and this goes back to our discussion of like prestige. Is this list is not the U.S. News World Report. It's not some consultant like me doing it. It's like we actually ask students where do you want to go to college as their parents where do they want to go to college, and this list seems to very neatly and tightly match my nuclear launch codes of the most prestigious slash difficult to get in slash whatever. It's like these results match my personal dealings with students. That yes, that Princeton, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and Yale are very popular with students and parents alike. And then as soon as you get past that, it does open up. There's more flexibility than you might expect, I suppose, going into the second half of the list, where yeah, like students that either it's like not their dream, nor do they. I think I would be curious, a student who put Cornell University or Brown
mhm.
University, it'd be like, well, do you is that because you don't think you can get into MIT, Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, or Yale? And they would go, kinda,
Right, right.
It's like, My dream school was USC. It was, and, like, it really was, but it was that because I knew I couldn't get into, like, an Ivy League school. So after that point, there's a lot of flexibility with what students want, and that's fine. Like, that's what I see with my average student. But what's important is that please don't take, well, this is like the students who put MIT, Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, they are not, like, gonna die if they don't get into those. They often wanna get into any of the schools in that list, is my experience,
Right.
and if not, like, Duke's pretty good, like Brown or Penn are pretty good. I worry this list could lead people to be like, "Oh my god, these poor brainwashed souls, like, they only if they don't get into MIT, they're doomed." No, like, that's not how these kids think. That's not actually how it works, and that's why these lists, I guess, can be a little bit deceiving. Is like to just be like, well, Brown wasn't on it last year. It's like, yeah, it's like different kids, there's different
Right.
opinions. But more so, I think that, yeah, it's like yeah, matches my understanding. But please give the students filling this form out a little bit more credit that if they don't get into their top school, that they can still be happy with their admissions chances. It's not that cut and dry.
Yeah. And another thing the Princeton review surveyed was worries. So, worries about college admissions. So, the survey actually found that 79% of students have either a high or very high stress level for the college application process. So, I mean, that's pretty high. And I'm just stressed like thinking about it. But do you think that like the pressure has increased since you first started, or is it about the same? Because it feels pretty intense.
I mean, I started this during COVID, and I guess, well, my first year was 2019, and then I was working with students that were not applying to the tippy top schools in America. I was at a different company, and they were interested in like UC Davis and everything, and they were just as stressed, if not more stressed, than the students I work with now. And I remember that, like, a lot
Really?
of that was, yeah, they were victims of Bay Area robot syndrome or what have you. That they
Yeah.
were high achieving, often wealthy. So a lot of them were often from like wealthy immigrant students, and they had like different expectations because they were struggling just to like keep up in their class. Yeah, like they were extremely stressed out. Then the year after, I start College with Mattie during COVID, and I'm suddenly working with the best of the best. And anything they were kind of like, I don't know if stress is the right word. They were all kind of like numb because it was COVID. Everyone was freaked out, and
Mm,
many of them were using just like, no, I'm going to get into X my dream school because the world is falling apart and like this isn't the plan. Were they stressed? I don't know, more or less than usual. Hard to tell. The next year, 2021, I had students that were still reeling from COVID. It was still going on. And they were being alerted by me sometimes that this is going to be a very difficult year because 22% of students basically were on the wait list to take a
right.
gap year, and they didn't like that. But mostly they were just really wanting to go see their friends again, and like they hated COVID because it was 2021. Were they more or less stressed than usual? Hard to tell. The year after that, well, I had a concussion, so I don't remember that year. I was more stressed than usual.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess 2022, 2023, and the last year, I guess was back to normal in a certain way. And yeah, I guess they were less stressed than the students that were dealing with it during a global viral outbreak. Like they were less
Mhm.
stressed. They were a little bit less stressed.
Pressure is off a little bit.
A little bit, a little bit. But that those have been the changes. Like the problem with all this stuff is that I'm a millennial. I was applying to school in 2009, and I promise you, it was not that much easier, and it was very stressful to apply to college in 2009. I think that
Mhm.
is at the core. I was thinking about our prestige episode. That is at the core of why I think my view on this process is so radically different than a lot of other people's is, and to the point where like I don't get it. Is like college admissions it was stressful as shit in 2009, just like it is now. And maybe the actual game, if you will, the strategy of how you got into college was different and maybe a little bit less refined. But it was all the same stuff. I was taking too many classes. I was doing too many extracurriculars. I was stressed out. And I remember being there, being like, I just want to get into a good school, man. Like and I wasn't sitting there. I wasn't miserable. And if I was, it wasn't really because I was working too hard. I was also a teenager, and I was struggling with the things that teenagers go through. I wanted girls to like me, like etc. I was living a
Mhm.
life. That was just how it was. It was how everyone else was around me, and we were I promise you, we were never, like, powwowing being like, "I cannot believe the US, education system has set up this trap for us to be pawns in this machine. What are they doing to us, our growing people must." No, that was never the conversation. It's like, "Dude, I just wanna get into Penn, like, shit, I just wanna get to USC, like,
Right.
yeah, I gotta go do this math thing." Like, "Yeah, you gotta go do that." And then I went to college, and all my friends there were stressed as hell getting into college, and then we all graduated, and there were no jobs because it was, 2013. But then and now I know all my people, and I talk about college admissions, and you know what the conversations are? It's like people are bummed out they didn't get into school they wanted to. That's how I remember college admissions. I'm bummed out I didn't get into USC. I am. I still am bummed out about it. I went to a school that
Mm.
I thought would be as good. I didn't like it as much. That is why when I look at this chart, I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty good chart. Like I like the like holding it up high is probably the way I would describe it because I would like if you want to know my students, I'd put like low a little bit higher. Like there's a kid every year that's like low stress. Those kids are sweet. Like good for them. I would probably put more in high and less in very high because like maybe I'm grading on a curve here. Very high is very high. I know, but that means something different to me. And I would say that's a slightly under one student a year. So we have 10, it's a little under 10% probably. I would say
Mhm.
is very high. And what I consider very high is it becomes obviously like this is bigger than college admissions. That this is causing issues. And to be fair, I then try to talk that student and they pretty clearly go, no, I want to get into college, and then we kind of just then it's our job honestly to try to make the process a bit smoother and easier for that
Yeah.
student, as opposed to shut it all down. This is going haywire because yeah, but high like that is I think high is a good way to describe how many students feel during this process. Average, yeah, I guess like I maybe when I think of low, I'm thinking of average because there's a student every year that's just like, yeah, you know. But then I think of
Right.
like, yeah, they're usually swimmers or the low. It's like, yeah, it'll be fine. I almost feel bad because this chart is I would put yeah less than very high, bit more in high, less than average, more in low, I guess. But I'd move it around a little bit. But yeah, this chart makes sense to me, and I'm sitting there and be like, okay, you know, yeah, this is the game.
Yeah.
I definitely try to keep students away from very high, and there are students I call it melting. Adults bloat, teens melt is my saying. Is that adults when they are in very high, they stop taking care of themselves. They eat too much. They start drinking or whatever, and they bloat. Like you can see when like a really
Mhm.
stressed out person, they start bloating. Teenagers don't. They melt in that they stop eating, they stop sleeping. Their hair gets really weird, and they look like zombies. Like that is like I can see it.
Yes.
Mhm.
I definitely have
And
seen a couple of our students like that.
right? Well, I call that out, and like
Yeah.
early in my career, I started noticing this with certain students, and it put me in a very difficult situation because I was like, well, what am I? Am I like a best friend, like therapist,
Right.
or am I a college admissions consultant who's being paid good money to get the student into the schools they and their parents want them to get into? And that's been a struggle for me, and,
Mhm.
like and honestly, I made the calls, like, I'm a college admissions consultant probably because I was so stressed out because that was really my thing, and that was the wrong call. Like, when students are entering very high, that is a real problem, and maybe that's the
Yeah.
distinction I wanna make, is that there is a limit to the stress that students can be put under, and I have seen it, and it is very it's where it can get dangerous, and I
Mhm.
think that's, like but maybe where I'm just a jerk is, like, I that is its own range, that is very high. High's kinda where we hang out. It's
It's
hard, this
true.
is stressful, and I am under high stress a lot as an adult sometimes. I have also been under very high stress, and I started to bloat, if you will, and things started falling apart, and, like yeah, just to look at this chart and be like, "Yeah, that makes sense, but I don't know what to do about it." It's like, that is kind of the idea.
What about students, maybe they don't have someone like where they're meeting regularly with them, but they're feeling like that meltdown. Do you have, like, advice for them, or how should they manage that?
Well, there's a distinction, like, high versus very high, and, like, those are probably 2 ways to describe it. Starting early in this process is a very important, good way to mitigate stress. I will say that like the middle of summer is a good time to start applying to college. After you finish your junior year, you start applying, if only because you need to give yourself time, and that time needs to like being effective with your time. You give yourself the ability to chill out for a little bit if things are crazy, because that is what I've found. There was a year that I missed time. I started late and then I got concussed. That was 2022, and then I missed time. And I do remember that my students were notably more stressed out,
Mhm.
and it was because like deadlines were approaching faster and faster, and well, they have a really busy week, or their mom is sick, or they're not feeling well. Like things come up.
Right.
I say is like you can finish this process. You can start as late as like August 15th or so if nothing goes wrong. Like working with me. However, something always goes wrong is what I've found out. So by starting earlier, you are bit. I do it with my like in my contract. I have 3 weeks off. I get to take whatever I want. You know, like it's baked in to this process that when something goes wrong, by starting earlier and already having a good workflow going, you have gifted yourself the ability to be like, okay, I'm not doing college things right now. I need to deal with my real life. Like that is probably the most that is how I have managed to keep like that's how I've actually put systems in place to keep my students out of the very high range, is that when
Yeah.
they're entering that, I can have it I could have a nice, calm, polite conversation with them, explain that I think they're melting, and like you're there to, and get to be a nice, friendly therapist man during the meeting because again, we have extra time. I can be a therapist man instead of like gotta get in a Duke.
Yes.
Then we figure out what their issues are, and it's usually their issues are not like this process is too hard. Like that is not the core issue. Like they are stressed about it. Like their core issue is usually something else. Their friend, it's normal like teen stuff or human stuff. Like they're fighting with their friend or their mom is like having trouble or it's like something else is going on, and they suddenly don't have the ability to be juggling that and also trying to get into the most elite schools in America. And that's like that'll happen. Like this
Mhm.
process. This process doesn't care about your life, like, outside of it,
That's so
unfortunately.
true.
So that's when knowing we start early and we think like, okay, so like we can move things around. We can be
Yeah.
more considerate about like how we're doing this. And then just the fact that like that we can't often super calm students down. They're like, really? Like yes, like no, we don't have to meet this Saturday. Go deal with that. Like I'll meet you twice next week or whatever. That is
Mhm.
how I am best able to calm students down. So I think it's probably how students could best like handle their own situation is by starting early and being ahead of when this process like you need to be doing stuff. That is going to put you in a situation so like when there are like other issues that pop up, you can now like bank that extra time to go deal with your whatever this is are and then get back to working. Whereas the opposite is you wait till all this is like due like 2 weeks from now, and then it's like then oh now your mom's also sick. Like sorry, dude, like the deadline's the deadline.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Okay, so another question that the Princeton Review asked was how many schools did you apply to? And the majority, 39%, applied to between 5 and 8 colleges. So most of your students applied to many more. So I'm just curious, like, what is your advice about that?
I'm surprised it's this low in this format because that I do believe that's one of the emerging like the emerging themes of modern college admission is that students are applying to more and more schools every year. It's an arms
Right.
race, and every single time I think of the same bit. I probably did like the first paragraph. Like I wish I was a consultant in 1987. That you because like there would be another member of the college Mattie team that would like duplicate students' handwriting with really nice handwriting onto other applications
Yes.
because and then we would scale it that way and like we would have like a letterer that would set it and then like imagine the EV gainage we could have and like just physically being able to apply to 27 schools like by hand.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this one's I'm surprised 5 to 8. I'm sure you can find other charts that like is going up. When it comes to more elites, like every chart says like it yeah, the numbers are going up, 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 up.
Mhm.
This one is I guess I resist the temptation to apply to even more schools with students because this was my strategy from day one, and I'm very open about it. Is the best way to get into an elite school or just a school in general is to apply to like as many as possible. Like there's
Right.
if you believe that this process is a lottery, which I don't, I do, but like if like you believe this process has variance, like that's what I actually believe about it. There's a lot of variance, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Simply increasing the number of lottery tickets or the number of people,
Yes.
the number of random admissions readers that look at your stuff and have to make a judgment call about you is just going to increase to a better overall odds of getting in. If you are wise enough to know what range you sit in. If you can't get if you are not good enough for a certain tier of school, you won't get into any of them. However, that's not even true either because I've had students get into tiers of schools above their weight class
Mhm.
that I would given somewhere between like a 0 and 2% chance, and then they get in enough that I'm like, yeah, of course. Like if you have any interest in a school whatsoever, I'm going to recommend students apply to it. If anything, I think where students go wrong is often with computer science, like panicking and applying to like 30 CS programs all across the country that
Yeah.
that don't make a ton of sense to me. But yeah, five to how many schools? Well, they ask how many schools should they apply to, or is it how many are they actually are
How
applying to?
many they did apply to?
I am always going to recommend students apply to as many schools as, especially if they're looking to get an elite school. More is more. I say this also knowing this will probably be a topic I will do every year. I'm in December finishing up with students, and we are scaling. We have finished between about 4 or 5 schools, and getting to one school is very difficult. Getting to four is also kind of a headache. But then it's time for schools like 5 through 20,
Right.
and often they and their parents are panicking because how are we going to get all these schools done in this short period of time? And I have to explain is like this process scales very nicely because we have all the personal statements done, the extracurriculars are done, school supplements are we have to do like new school supplements, but often that's just reusing old school supplements with different. I'll do an episode about scaling applications because it's very important. And I actually find myself very frustrated when I'm actually doing it with students, like just how easy and effective it is to scale from 4 or 5 schools to 20 or 25. It is rapid in a way that seems impossible unless you have like I have done it dozens and upwards of dozens and dozens of times in the last 5 years, and
Yes.
students are amazed by it as well. And that's where I get pretty upset with people like the naysayers are like, no, don't apply to 20 schools. That's ridiculous. Whereas it's like, dude, like this isn't hard, like in practice, it is actually very easy and effective to if you've applied to 5 schools to apply to 20. In a way that really upsets me that there are people who think they know better telling students that they're idiots for want to do it this way. It's like I'm actually the guy doing it, and it takes like 20 minutes to make
Yeah.
another application.
And the students
So
catch on as well because, like,
totally,
they get better at, like, the research, they know exactly what they're
yeah.
looking for at each school.
Yeah, that also scales in that way. That applying to college is itself a skill set to learn and acquire. And by the time you have applied to 5, 6, 7 schools, you will really sharpen that skill set. That you may as well like keep using it. Like, yeah, keep applying, dog. And that's also what leads to starting early being a very effective. Like everything is easier if you start as early as you possibly can. Like right after your summer year, right after you finish your junior year of school is a good time to get going on college applications. And if you can have something resembling your personal statement and your UCSAs done by the time you start school in September, you're in a very good spot because similarly to like reducing stress and like things get more chaotic when you go back to school, like having everything done by early mid December, then you have 2 or 3 weeks where you're on winter break, and instead of like cramming to get everything you need done, you still can look there and be like, hey, what if I applied to Duke? What if I applied to Harvard? What if I applied to Stanford? Let's try it. And you do so with a much clearer mind and an energy level that you need to like make that stuff good enough. It's just like it's October really October's a big one. October and December, I'd say like when my debt comes due with students
Mhm.
that if we did the work correctly, we did it on time, and everything got done correctly, it's a pretty chill. October's a big one. It's a pretty chill month, and it's just like finishing stuff up, and we keep moving. If we have delayed, or I was concussed for multiple weeks, or I started too late, that month is hell, and it's very stressful, and I feel it, and it's extremely stressful and miserable trying to get everything done in time because you start panicking, and it's when I start having to spend my limited time and energy planning how we're gonna get everything done in time, that's when I know I
Mhm.
screwed up. Like it shouldn't be like that. It should be like, okay, cool. There's like this is what's left. We have this much time. Awesome. Let's go do it. Yeah, like that is a much that really I know it lowers my stress level significantly. So I assume it helps students as well, and it also leads situations where yeah I take pride in that. And the like second half of October, it's like yeah we can apply to this weird program you want, this BSMD program or this scholarship. Yeah, like we have the time and energy to do that, and that's only possible if you're getting everything done effectively leading up to it. That is the number one like Maddie's tip for reducing stress in the process. Is like you have to start on time, and you have to have a workflow that allows you to deal with like other problems as they arise with the time, and or have the time and energy to do more stuff when you want. Like that is what it leads to.
What about a student who's kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum? Like they've got 50 schools they want to apply to. Are you like, yeah, YOLO it, or should they try to narrow it down?
It turns out like 18 is about if you include the UCs as one school, which
Mhm.
I kind of do. 18 if you are applying to the UC, including one school, and more like 22, 23 if you're not. California residents about 18, non-California residents like 23. And that is this is a weird one, but it's just I have found over and over and over and over and over again that with students, it's around 18 to 25 schools you run out of schools to apply to. It doesn't really matter what you're trying to do or what your goals are. It's always right around 20 that we start applying to schools that either are elite schools that they don't even like, so that or elite schools that like they really like are kind of silly, like liberal arts colleges. That's when off like the Amherst of the world start showing up,
Yes. Mhm.
or Pomona's, and it's like a student that does not want to go to Amherst, they don't want to go to Pomona, or vice versa. If they're really into liberal arts colleges, that's when MIT shows up. It's like you're not going to MIT. Like I know, or that's when yeah, like but even that, like that kind of like, well, more elite school, that only get you like 25, 26. If you're going down to 50, you're going the other way. And that I find much more annoying, I suppose. There's students
Mhm.
every year, and this is most common with CS students that are applying to Virginia Tech and Texas Tech and UVA and sorry and Michigan State. I had a student applying to Michigan State. I'm like, why the hell are you? I was like, why the hell are you applying to Michigan State? And they're like, my dad went there, like, and then she ended up at Harvard. So like, I don't think Michigan State was the
Oh
correct
my
call.
gosh.
Yeah, it's like I would say 18 to 25 is a good number. If you want to get up to like, there's also most of my students, our students apply to like more like 30 or 35 probably. But what happens
Yeah.
is in my nuclear launch codes, basically you can look up their common data set. Any school that is accepting students above your average GPA and test scores, and you have like above their averages, you're very likely going to get into that school. I truly believe that. And that's the case over and over again, which leads to students that there's always like, I would say 5 to 10 schools on their college list that I go, so you're free to apply here. However, I don't really think I need to help you. And they go, oh, okay. And honestly, I have a policy that often those schools get done in a big bunch when the student
Mhm.
is very stressed out that they're doomed and they won't get in anywhere. And then they go, and I say, when that happens, and it will, go ahead and apply to like 7 schools that I don't have to know about in one day. And I have it on good authority that they report back. They feel much better afterwards. So if
Yes.
that's why you're applying to these schools, go ahead. Go ahead. Like, I have just proof that the students they're glad they did, they feel better, and that doesn't come up again. And then around now they'll be like, I got into UIUC. I'll be like, what the hell is like, yeah.
Yeah.
I got into Haverford. I got into Middlebury. I got one. I'm like, what? Okay, congrats. I'm very proud of you, young man. I didn't know. Yeah. Sure. Like if only because I guess maybe this is going to be like the opposite of what people are saying. Is like applying to more schools seems to chill my students out. They seem
Mhm.
to, yeah, and yeah, that is probably the biggest takeaway. Is I truly believe I reduce my students' stress level by allowing them or supporting them in applying to as many schools as they possibly want. So maybe it's like that's what I would say to people that are saying like this is wrong. Like, well, only applying to 5 to 8 schools when all those suddenly are very important, that would actually make me a hell of a lot more stressed out as
That's
well.
true. That's true.
Maybe that's what this all goes back to with like the dream school arguments. Like I heavily try to reduce stress from my students. I don't know how successful I always am, but I do it in my own way. And part of that is
Mhm.
by having a timeline and a system that is effective and efficient leads to if there are problems, they can be dealt with on their like we can move around. It's flexible. And basically building an application that is scalable to a large number of schools to give the best possible chance that you will get into one that you'll be happy with. And that's maybe not the traditional consultant way of reducing stress in a process, but that is how I do it. And a lot of that's how I reduce my own stress in this process. Maybe that's why I built it this way. Is I know what stuff makes me really stressed out, and that is why I've had to fix things so that they don't happen to students. And to my credit, students have gotten less stressed I've worked with. And I don't think it's because of
Mhm.
any big changes in them. I think it's because the process itself works better. And I know this because when the process fell apart, because I bonked my head and started 2 weeks later than usual because I was lazy. I remember the students being notably stressed and reaching the very high level, if you will, and feeling very bad about that. So
Yeah.
yeah, like it all comes full circle in that way. And also, there's no dream schools. We just apply to all of them. Who cares? Like, like it'll be
That's
fine.
true. Then it just becomes, yeah, not even a
Hmm.
question. Okay, so kind of just to close out our discussion, there is an optional survey question. So they get the respondents can say like what's their advice for next year's applicants and students. So funnily enough, the thing that parents and students say the most is actually start early. So, but you had like a lot of detailed, amazing advice in addition to just start early. But another thing that students said was listen to what your kid has to say, which I thought was like really poignant for parents to kind of think about. And it also makes me think about kind of the way that you work with your students is the parents aren't necessarily like a huge part of the process. So I was
What's one way
just
to describe it?
so can you talk a little bit about that? Like why does it work and how did you come to that?
Well, I said listen to what your kid has to say. It's like I but don't listen to what the parent has to say, I suppose is probably. Yeah, so the nature of my process is for those who don't know, I work one-on-one with students. So do you. We kind of take turns with them. We handle different aspects of it, but I am live with them on Zoom 1.5 times a week for 6.5 months. And we are in my specialty is the essay writing work, and we get right to that doing the UC essays. But it's pretty difficult not to chat with a student for an hour and a half a week for 6.5 months and not get to know them pretty well and get to figure out what their interests
Mhm.
are. I guess probably the interesting part is again maybe because it's self-selecting, but the students who come to me they often have like their interests and where they want to go to school. I think matches their parents' interests pretty heavily. Insofar as well, going back to the dream school list, they're not that different, right? It's like
Mhm.
this it's find me the student whose dream is Stanford, but their parents are like, nah, Michigan.
Right, right.
um, yeah, it's I guess students like my flexibility. Maybe if you're listening to this, like I am currently taking signups at collegeofmattie.com for this year. Is like I've kind of go over my system. Is I listen in that I go, of course, like I'm a yes man. I say is that it's a lot easier to listen to students when you part of my workflow, my orders, I'm like, cool, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we
Mhm.
can do that. That is what like listen to what they have to say means to me, because in the few instances I have not listened to them, it's instead been I didn't want to do something. um, and that's why yeah, it just reminds me of like I think that's the problem with like high school counselors often is I remember I would bring like work to them and they would be like, "Yeah, this is great." And then I would be like, "Is it? I don't think it's great." And even at the time I realized that the problem is that if you are critical of something or disagree with a work a student has done, you are inherently accepting the role of fixing it. And that was why everything was great. And I guess I listen to it because I have that time and energy. I also can tell students they're being silly. You know, like I
Mhm.
will listen to it, but I also am happy to say when I believe they are incorrect or try to guide them in a way that seems to be effective. You know, it's like it's interesting. Listen to what let your child guide the process. It's their path, and you're a guide. I don't. I agree with more with the first one, I guess, than the second one.
Right.
It's like, yeah, yes, absolutely listen to what the students have to say, and I do. However, I guide the process. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm a professional
That's
college
true, yeah.
consultant. However, in guiding the process, it's a lot of like, you want to apply here, you want to do this, and they go, yeah, and I go, they decide what we do. It's my job to then explain like what's the strat, how we get it done. I guess is that like that's what a guide does. You know, like so
Exactly.
yeah, like, I guess that's my split. Is it? It's like literally a guide is like a consultant is a guide. I guess the students is if your parents are not listening to what you have to say, you don't need their permission to apply places. Maybe that's what I would say the
Mhm.
advice is.
Okay.
I would say be a brave soldier, and if your parents want you to apply to certain places, even if it seems silly, like humor them. However, never let I don't think you should ever let your parents like forbid you for applying to a certain place if you want to apply. Like they have to pay like they have to, there's an application fee, I guess, but that's what leads to this kind of like, yeah, 50 schools, if you really want kind of mindset is this is a very important process. And it's too important to get bogged down by like what people are saying or like people being upset. If you want to go to a school, you should apply there. You should do your best effort. And part of that is yeah, like, no, I'm the guide. It's their path, you're the guide. It's their path, but I'm the guide. Wait, let your child guide the process. It's their path and you're a guide. That does not make sense. Okay, this is why I'm breaking my brain. No, we're gonna finish with this. Let your child guide the process. Okay, it's their path and you're a guide. Why wouldn't a guide be the one to guide a process? That's why this like this quote makes no sense.
That's true. I don't
Y
know.
yeah, if you're 48 minutes into this podcast, it's still here, like, let's no, this is why I'm a writer. This is why I broke my brain because it's their path and you're a guide, but then the guide guides a
Guides
process.
them on the path, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, this is the parents need to they need to talking to because that makes no sense. Okay, anything to finish with this show? I'm tired.
Okay, so your advice then would the biggest takeaway then is if you wanna apply to a school, just do it.
Regarding this is that
Mhm.
it is your future students. It is like it is your this is a very important process. And yeah, like you should start early because it's important. And you this will be stressful, but you should do everything you can to work through it because it's important. And similarly is you should do it the way you want to do it, the best of your ability. And that can include as many schools as you want to do because it's so important. That is my overall takeaway as it relates to all this. And you should apply to your dream school, even if you don't think you get in, because it's important. Because you deserve it too. Also, a guide guides things. How could the child guide the process? I think we really hit the core issue of this
Yes.
whole entire essay. Thank you, Michelle. It was a good
Thank you.
discussion. See you next time. I am now taking on students for the 2025-26 college admission season. If you are a current junior who's looking for help specifically with their college application and essays, you should check out my website. It's collegewithmattie.com. And there you can see my services, my blog with other written posts, as well as book out a free consultation where you get a chance to chat with me and see how I might be able to help. Looking forward to meeting with you.